Hey, it's Matt O'Leary, and it's that magical, warm, beautiful, brilliant time of year where we're going to go through the top albums, this time of 2023, in case you didn't know. And I decided to just go the extra mile for you. I am giving you 50 albums this year. We're going to talk a lot less about each one and just kind of rapid fire for at least the first 25. And I just want to say at the outset that 2023 was a great year. You know, I brought the channel back after kind of going dormant for the last few years, and it really was a great response. It was very successful. So thank you so much for that. We just reached 2,000 subscribers. So thank you, and I'm just going to continue this thing into 2024. At number 50, it's the album Future of the Sea by Plank. This is some instrumental prog with some mathy bits, some krautrock in there. At number 49 is the Drop Dead Gorgeous acoustic instrumental album by Adeline Hotel called Hot Fruit. At number 48 is another album by the band White Denim. Very short, very sweet, very punchy, kind of psych jazz rock. I just love everything these guys do. A deep well of ambient and classical music comes together on number 47. It's the Dutch pianist and composer Mirek Cotini with Through Empty Landscapes and New Beginnings. Number 46 is Matteo Mancuso with The Journey. This is some ridiculous guitar virtuosity that really goes above and beyond anything I've heard in jazz fusion or progressive metal lately. The grandfathers of indie rock come in at number 45. It's Wilco with Cousin. I love the guitar work from Niels Klein on this album. It's just, it has a palpable dread. And the lyricism and that very emotive but deadpan delivery from Jeff Tweedy. These guys just nail it every time, but I think this is one of my favorite Wilco albums. The UK indie rock and post-punk band Do Nothing come in at number 44 with Snake Sideways. And number 43 is Isobar 3 by Isobar. This is some very tasty instrumental prog and jazz fusion. I hear all the classics in the DNA of this thing. I hear Genesis, I hear Crimson, I hear kind of that Camel, Andy Latimer guitar tone. Number 42 is the uplifting and beautiful Your Own Adventure by Hollow Hand. There's great vocal harmonies in this music. There's kind of that Byrds influence with the vocal harmonies, but also the 12-string guitar sound. And it was mixed and produced by Chris Cohen, who has got to be one of my favorite in this kind of indie psych bedroom pop sound. Number 41 is a super fun one. This is the kind of Mastodon-esque and stoner rock Mutants by Mutoid Man. At number 40 is an album that was sort of disappointing, to be honest. It still gets on this list, but it sounds a lot like Carrie and Lowell because it's by Sufjan Stevens, but it's not nearly as good as that album, but I still like it. It's Javelin. At number 39 is some crooning stadium rock, if that's even possible. It's the Indonesian band Efek Rumah Kaca with Rimpong. So yeah, pretty obscure one here, but I just can't get enough of the vocals and the melodies. At number 38 is some very quirky and hyperactive instrumental stuff from the Filibuster Saloon. It's called Going Off Topic. Really hard album to explain, but there's a lot of really tricky playing in here. At number 37 is the band Fruit Bats with A River Running to Your Heart. This is some folk rock with just euphoric chord changes in some of these songs. Like there are some tracks here that I played over and over again this year, like See the World by Night or It All Comes Back. At number 36, we are getting warmer and warmer as we head to the top on this list. It is the UK prog duo Amplifier with the album Hologram. There are some very hooky vocal moments on this album, but also some very drawn out jammy parts, all in one. It's more so like modern alternative rock than it is like a retro or symphonic prog sound. You know, it's got some very grunge-like guitar tones and riffs. Number 35 is the comeback album from Damon Albarn and the Boys. It's Blur with the Ballad of Darren. I was surprised to enjoy all the slower moments on this album because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of ballads and it's just very compact, very good from start to finish. At number 34 is a very exciting young prog band, but they really just gave us a smorgasbord of prog subgenres on this album, and also one of the album covers of the year. Like that thing, any sort of hand-drawn, illustrated animals gets me. It's the band OK Goodnight with The Fox and the Bird. This is an extremely memorable, extremely unique and diverse and creative album. At number 33, the top dogs of progressive metal decided to come away from their very heavy stint on Vector Virus with a much more colorful record in Fauna from Haken. Between about 2016-ish, like Affinity times to today, there have been so many great albums that have come out in this genre that Haken don't feel like the kingpins anymore, and unfortunately all their new music just gets compared to that great older stuff when they really were at their peak. I still feel like this is a very good album, and unfortunately for them, if it would have been put out by any other band, I feel like it really would have caught attention even more so. The best rock band in the world, I think, for the past 7-8 years comes in at number 32, which is pretty low on my list compared to where they usually come in with their multiple releases per year. Yes, I'm talking about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with PetroDragonic Apocalypse. This was a progressive thrash metal album. I think I liked it more than Infest the Rat's Nest for its progressive tendencies. Just that genre is not something that I go back to all the time, so I really only listened to this a handful of times this year. Really liked what I heard, and hopefully I'll just, continue to get acquainted with it as time goes on. At number 31 is another album I reviewed. It's Angelo De Augustine with Toil and Trouble. This is one of those sensitive souls from the Sufjan Stevens Asthmatic Kitty label. It's very lush, finger-picked folk with that very whispery vocal approach that he has. Sufjan also has. I think it's probably one of Angelo's best albums. At number 30 is a great prog album, really unexpected this year. It's Radio Silence from Rain. This is Andy Edwards' band, who was a drummer for multiple bands, probably most notably the band IQ. And he's also a YouTuber, a fellow YouTuber. So hello, Andy. Thank you for this music. I really appreciate it, and I think any prog fan will love it. At number 29 is Be Good, The Crazy Boys by Art Feynman. There's just such a feel-good, fantastic energy to this album from Luke Temple, who is a successful solo artist in his own right. It's kind of channeling that frenetic Talking Head sound, but with a little bit more psychedelia in there. It's just a super fun, super unique and funky album. At number 28 is Grails with Onkus and Most. This mind-expanding and foreboding instrumental album that's kind of somewhere in between like a noir film score and electronic prog. And as spacious as this is, for as soundtrack-ish as it is, I like how economical the compositions are. The progressions actually arrive somewhere. At number 27 is another prog metal album, very much in that Haken vein, very traditional sound but undeniable songwriting. It's the band Advent Horizon with A Cell to Call Home, and I think the songs Truth and Ran on Open Water are two of my favorite prog metal songs of the year. At number 26 is an album that honestly I expected to creep even higher up my list, but I didn't really listen to it a lot since it came out in the spring. It's the band Dispirited Spirits with a Redshift Blues. Very hard band and sound to explain, but led by the 19-year-old Indigo Diaz, and he is just such a talent on guitar and vocals. You could call it art rock, you could call it emo with some post-rock and jazz and just all sorts of stuff in there. It is really eclectic, it's really unique, and just a really special and young band. A quick outfit change and a full night's sleep later, and we're back with number 25. This is an anthemic roots rock meets world music album. It's Brothers and Sisters by Steve Mason. This is kind of similar to Peter Gabriel's album In Spirit. It's got that humanitarian spirit. It's got that almost adult contemporary vibe to it, made by an adult contemporary, so makes sense. It's not really my thing on paper, but Steve just crafted some gems on this thing that hit me on a really primal level, like a dance-worthy level. I love the hooks on this album. I love this meeting of Western and Eastern musical traditions. Next up is a very light, very lovely album about serial killers and necrophiliacs. German prog band RPWL slides in at number 24 with their 8th album, Crime Scene. And it's a very dark dive into the psyches, into the circumstances of some of, history's most infamous criminals. Pink Floyd is the obvious comparison here, but I think Stupid Dream era Porcupine Tree is closer to their sound. Very pure tones and a very 90s fretless bass sound and big spacious drums. Very pure and, smooth and melodic, but there is some grit in the metal riffs, the atmospherics, and the, dark themes, obviously. The album has some incredible highs, like that opening track, Victim of Desire, which just oozes emotion. Next up is a side project of the drummer of the band The War on Drugs. It's Charlie Hall with Invisible Ink. I think that composition is really my top value in music. Like, I'm always listening to the way melodies and harmonies work together, to chord sequences, but there is room for just functional music, and this is definitely that. It is put on during my workday, and it's the perfect soundtrack to that, and keeps me in that flow state, if you will. And then between tasks, at the end of things, when I choose to really tune in and listen closely, it rewards with a lot of depth. But a very soothing, a very hypnotic listen. At number 21 is a really cool album because it veers off the track of what this band usually does and is totally unexpected. Usually they have this heavy psychedelic prog sound, but on this one they went with something much lighter and acoustic and filled with gorgeous harmonies. At number 22, it's Motorpsycho's Yay. An endless mutation or progress. The band enlisted longtime collaborator Reina Fisca from the band Dungen to produce this album, who's the guitarist of the band Dungen, which are definitely one of my favorite psych rock bands. And Fisca brings his texture and tone-obsessed sensibilities to this great batch of songs. Tracks like Patterns and Cold and Bored typify this dreamy, wistful acoustic sound of the album, with all sorts of playful instrumental choices like mellotron and glockenspiel and hand drums. There's also some more chipper, almost campfire jam tracks on here as well, like What Comes After or Dank State. Then there's one big winding prog song at the end, Hotel to Dallas, which balances out all this lighter acoustic fare with something much more epic. As a newcomer to Motorpsycho in the last year or so, I was really pleasantly surprised by this album, to hear their range as a band, to hear them strip away some of the distortion to reveal the strength of the core songwriting. We go from Norway to Sweden for number 21. This is a sprawling 80s-infused prog album from Moon Safari, a comeback album after 10 years. It's Himmelbacken Volume 2. Moon Safari are very technical, but all about these stacks of vocal harmonies. And their arrangements are relentless, happy beams of blinding sunshine. And I love that they just haven't suppressed that at all. That tendency, that core of the band and the mood of listening to this band on this album. I feel like they've definitely heard the critics out there who say they're too sweet, they're too saccharine, it's too much of a good thing, but they just double down. They've really upped the overall production on this album, just bringing some serious synth pedigree and some more metal to their sound. If you're in for a little 80s ballad cheese and some of the cutest little acoustic guitar and piano intros you've ever heard, and the best prog epic of the year in the 21-minute Teen Angel Meets the Apocalypse, then do not sleep on Moon Safari. Number 20 is the best non-Blur album by a Blur member this year, and it's not Gorillaz. That is Blur guitarist Graham Coxon's debut self-titled album under the name The Wave with Eleanor Rose Dougal. A shape-shifting rock album that wears many hats, and they all look pretty good. Of course, Graham's guitar is at the core of this album, but he also plays a lot of saxophone to really channel his love for King Crimson. And strings, drum machines, and modular synths bring all these eccentric textures. I'm just amazed that they don't retread any territory on this album. It feels like every single song brings something new. The album gets pretty rockin', but it also has these shades of more traditional folk music as well, which is a staple of Graham's solo work, like the album The Spinning Top. Such killer production, it's a beautiful headphone listen and really cool contrast between their voices, Graham and Rose's, and great songs as well, so you can't really go wrong. Number 19 is an album that disappointed me just a little bit at the time of release, but it still ended up getting an 8 out of 10, just mainly due to how much I love this band and everything they do. And I've kept listening, and it's only crept higher and higher up the list. Unknown Mortal Orchestra are likely to get a spot on this list any year they put an album out. Like, hands down, one of the best psych rock bands of the past 10, 15 years. Albums like 2 and Multi-Love are life-changing for me. Ruben continues to be intentionally enigmatic on this one, with his signature muffled vocals and other lo-fi affectations. But the musicianship is always there. I mean, the crazy, weird, chromatic chord progressions and the bizarre, totally unexpected melodies. He does whatever he can to drown out this technical prowess in weird effects and cool vibes. But I see through it. So Ruben, if you're watching, because I know you followed this year, you like Krabby Patties, don't you, Squidward? I think knowing the singles on this album so well before it came out really did hurt the overall experience when it first came out, but looking in the rear view, so to speak, I think, I just see the strength of this thing from front to back. We venture into the avian-inspired world of math rock meets jazz fusion meets a Canterbury-style prog on number 18. It's Eyeless Owl with Murmurations. If, Steve Hackett and Steve Hillage joined together in a modern band like Thank You Scientist and played something in the style of Mouse on the Keys or Battles, then you might have something like Eyeless Owl. For 43 minutes, this album pummels your brain with ideas and riffs and more riffs. Number 17 is a character study about a guy named Norm from the Canadian chamber folk prince Andy Schauf. Hiding his face behind the throne, shoulder peeking. Andy just has to be one of the most unassuming frontmen in slacker indie rock today. He truly does more with less. He ekes out so much emotion from the simplest of melodies and chord progressions, and his lyrics aren't super witty or super verbose or anything. But somehow I'm just a moth to a flame on this album. It's not an album that I'd share with someone and be like, dude, you're gonna be blown away. But the everyday profundities of Norm really strike a chord. Whether it's the little ringing bell sound on Paradise Cinema or that song about a Halloween store, for real, or Sunset, which is one of my favorite songs of the year for reasons I can't explain. I don't know, it's just my thing. It works for me. The major storyline in rock music, I think, this year is that some of the biggest acts came through with some stellar albums. Like some of the most mainstream artists put out albums that only bolstered their tremendous reputation. Some of the heroes of 2023 who are yet to come on this list are legacy acts and just artists who really dominate their niche, but the Foo Fighters are bordering on mainstream. Where will I wake up? Foo Fighters, But Here We Are is a fantastic album. You just can't deny this album. Like, I've always found the Foo Fighters to be pretty generic, but these songs are just great. I love this very rare 10-minute song on the back half of the album, The Teacher. But I think Show Me How is probably my favorite, which blends a little bit of dream pop, a little bit of shoegaze, and has him and his daughter singing together. And man, just sparks fly with these two. The way they sing unison on the verses and then split into those harmonies on the chorus is just fantastic. This is just the exact kind of album that keeps rock relevant in the 2020s. You know, they have no interest in doing something avant-garde or strange or experimental, and with great songs like this, they don't have to. Now for something a little more obscure, you know, this band has got a lot less followers on Spotify than the Foo Fighters. It's some Swiss post-rock at number 15. It's the band Hubris with The One Above. Metempsychosis from 2020 is the album that really sucked me into this band's dynamic sound. A conceptually immersive record with Greek mythology at the heart. But this album tops that one musically somehow. I mean, it's 4 kind of mini epic tracks all over 10 minutes, all of them offering something much different compositionally, despite the pure sound and palette being pretty consistent. Thanks to some just excellent mixing and production, this album sounds beautiful and vast. There are some metal elements to the sound, but for the most part, the band is pretty clean, pretty elegant, classic post-rock with, some big crescendos. At number 14 is a band with 76 Spotify followers, but I'm convinced that they're gonna have a lot more than that if they keep this up. It's the French band Poupra, or Purple, with their debut self-titled album. Maybe it's an affinity for album covers with big citrus fruit on them. But it's everything about this band that gets me, from their bold, tongue-in-cheek style to their clear love for 70s prog like Crimson and Floyd, which come through loud and clear on the first 2 tracks. And I love the makeup of the band with 2 primary vocalists. The first is this very gruff male voice that sounds like Lumiere, honestly. And there's a soft, soothing female voice, and the 2 of them go back and forth between songs, within songs, and that contrast works beautifully. Violin plays a prominent role in their sound, so there's a bit of the Dixie Drag sound in there, and, you know, they even whip out like reggae and bits of bossa nova. Then there's also a lot of funky bass playing, like the super tight 3rd track, Bojack. It's very like pompous and ridiculous, you know, there's a little bit of like a Les Claypool kind of energy there. But the playing is there, and the songwriting is there. So this band is going places, and I'm just here to spread the word. Number 13 continues a trend of that Foo Fighters album of this big artist who met these sky-high expectations from their very large fan base. And there's no doubt that Steven Wilson came through this year with an excellent album that definitely met the expectations and delivered something that really no one could expect. At number 13, it's the Harmony Codex. Sure, you know, we've heard chilly electronics and cinematic atmospheres before from Wilson, but never to this scale. On a pure production level, this was truly something above and beyond, even for him. It's pristine in a way that doesn't sap excitement and energy. Song-wise, it's a bit hit or miss for me, with some low moments like the song Rock Bottom, go figure. But tracks like Inclination and What Life Brings and Time Is Running Out and Staircase are so brilliant and diverse and have just got so many replays this year. It's not quite to the heights of Raven or Hand Cannot Erase, but it's definitely a firm step up from Future Bites or To the Bone. At number 12, like number 13, was one of my most anticipated albums of the year, and it definitely topped the last album, like Steven Wilson's, from way back in 2018 called Sonder. But it didn't quite crack my top 10, and that is TesseracT's War of Being. TesseracT is, of course, the progressive metal djentish band from the UK who always bring a lot of cinematic atmosphere through their sound design, along with some crushing, burn the house down riffs and soaring melodic choruses. I think Daniel Tompkins on this album comes to the fore as the premier harsh to soft progressive metal vocalist. He is just a powerhouse on this album. And this album feels like a realization of the sound they set out to make in the first place. Ultimately, it's one where I'm still a little bit more in awe of it than in love with it. I do like Altered State and Polaris more, I think. But I think on some objective level, this album is the most accomplished album this year in this genre, with more dynamic range and attention to detail in every moment. Finally, on this top albums countdown, at number 11 is an album I just discovered at the beginning of the month, and maybe it's been 3-4 weeks. I think I've played it multiple times almost every day since. At number 11, it's the band At with Mind Palace Music. This very short album brings all the charm, all the warm fuzzies of that 2006-ish indie period, you know, like an album like Sung Tongs by Animal Collective is a really obvious and unavoidable comparison. At is the duo Victoria Rose from Philly and Stone Phillip Zach from Baltimore. I don't know the best way to describe this album. It's kind of like freak folk, bedroom, chamber pop, with a real disregard for perfect intonation, you know, a lot like Animal Collective singing. I know this kind of aughts era indie sound can really turn some people off. You know, if you're listening to albums like Steven Wilson's and TesseracT's, then yeah, you might not like this. But the writing and arrangements on this album are phenomenal. I just cannot get enough of these songs. So definitely go listen to this album and check out my top 10 albums of 2023. That video is coming very soon. I'll link it below. I'll throw it in a pinned comment. I'm also going to do a top 10 songs of 2023 and a little collab video with my wife, which is just an annual tradition, and probably some other videos to wrap up the year and start 2024. So stay tuned, and as always, thank you so much for watching.